Welcome back on the AM show. And as you can see, those colors in the background, yes, we have a stalwart from the New Patriotic Party joining us this morning. He is a former press secretary. He performed that role under former President Akuffo. He has been general secretary of the New Patriotic Party. He's a man of many parts. Engineering is one of those parts, and he's played some crucial roles in there. But this time round, he seeks to be flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party and eventually become the CEO of our country, Mr. President. Who knows, maybe I could be in the presence of the next president of the land. But we're going to have a conversation with him and find out what exactly makes him feel he is cut out for the cloth of presidency, what plans he has, and who he is, basically. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Engineer Kwabena Agyei Agyepong. I'm tempted this morning to call you Agyei Agyepong.
You just call me K, it's fine.
Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Ben. I see you are also part of the beard gang.
What should I say? Yes. I think I'm in that category.
I can see a lot of the young people are growing beards.
Maybe we're not coconut heads, like Kwabena Agyei would suggest. But it's really good to have you. Let's start with a bit of a background concerning who you are and what you do. What has brought Kwabena Agyepong to this point?
Well, I was born on 6th March.
6th March?
1962.
Wow.
Yes.
Independence Day.
Independence Day.
I'm 3 days ahead of you.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You are?
3rd March.
3rd March, okay.
Yes.
That's interesting. Schooled in Kumasi, Royal International School. Taught my class in Common Entrance. Went to Infancy School. Became the library prefect in 1981. Then Tech, Civil Engineering, BSc. In 1986, started work as a professional working with Ghana Highway Authority. And in those days, they used to teach you a lot of things. Beautiful rotations around the country, whether it's road maintenance, bridge maintenance, survey and design contracts, material quality control. And so I worked on quite a number of projects, the Ramrod Road, Hoa Sikuma Junction, Brewenia Singh, Kwanta, Pasa to the Uti River. You know, working on the Anyuan Kwanta, Bekwai, Yamransa Road when I was at Survey and Design. And in 1991, I was part of the team that supervised the reconstruction of the asphaltic concrete overlays at the Kotoka International Airport. And being the only airport, when it is closed for about a week, it's caused a lot of distraction to the airline business. So working around the clock 24 hours, you know, that's some of the experiences. Of course, I moved on. To set up a private firm with my colleague. We worked on a big project in Obuasi. It's still there now, Tiny Roland Estate, 150-unit housing project from scratch, delivered on time within budget. We were the project engineers, architects, and managers of that project. Many other projects, even when the GASM head office at the time on the Ring Road caught fire, we did the structural assessment. You know, so I've done quite a bit, but politics took me away from engineering quite early, you know. So
maybe not totally, because I see that even in engineering, you've done quite a lot.
Yeah,
you've led institutions both in Ghana and in West Africa.
That's right. I mean, quite recently, I was the executive director of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, and with that, the West African Federation of Engineering Organizations. And so it gave me the opportunity to be at various conventions around the world, whether it's in Australia or Costa Rica or Los Angeles quite recently. So yes, but something happened in my life, and I'm sure you're aware of that. I don't want to always take us back to 40 years ago. The unfortunate death of my father with his colleagues, and that lit a spark in me. That really has been something that propelled me to do what I'm doing, to restore Ghana back to democracy. And I think I played quite a modest role as a young man, 29 years, you know, being the face and voice of Professor Dubois' campaign in 1992, in those very heady days under the military dictatorship. So you needed to be courageous. I mean, the MPP itself, at the time it was being fashioned, the kinds of principles, the ideals that those of us who decided to sacrifice for this party. You had to be a strong character. How do we prepare to give something back to society, to your party? Those values have disappeared a bit, and that's what animates what I'm doing. I think after 30 years of democracy, Ghana, we can beat our chest and be proud of what we've been able to achieve. As I said, wherever I've traveled to, when my name is mentioned, I'm introduced as representing engineers from Ghana and West Africa. People look at you with a lot of inspiration because having had successful transitions over the last 30 years.
Right.
Despite all the economic shortcomings that we do face currently, I think it is a much better place than being under a military dictatorship. And so some of us have an onerous responsibility to caution the youth when especially we fall into difficult times and we hear some of them talk about military takeovers. They haven't lived through it. And so I deem it a duty for myself to always caution people, alert people that this is a better place for us, a constitutional democracy where we get the opportunity to elect our leaders every 4 years. And
right. 29, that reminds me of former President Akuffo himself. That's when he first got into, got a ministerial portfolio, during the Buzia regime. And interestingly, you served under him as well. Your party, the New Patriotic Party, initially, from what we hear, was supposed to be the National Patriotic Party. And through some stroke of whether proclamation or otherwise, it became the New Patriotic Party instead of National Patriotic Party.
Our party chairman, B.J. Darocha, who did the change very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, because he wanted us to be different. No.
And it has stuck. Just to make this point, so you do what my father did, civil engineer, architect, and he was also at KNUST. Unfortunately, he passed a long time ago as well. So when you mentioned the story about your dad, it just came flooding back with memories. But looking at the birth of your party, the Fourth Republic.
That's right.
And how far you have come within that party, what would you say have been the highlights of your political career? Being the face, so to speak, of the NPP right from the onset, all the way through 1996. Of course, in 1992, 93, you didn't even field parliamentarians.
That's right.
So it was clean sweep for the National Democratic Congress, from the PNDC to the NDC. In 1996, you went ahead, clawed back a number of seats. In 2000, you were able to win the elections, lost out in 2008, came back in 2016. You've not always served, and it's not always been smooth sailing for you.
That's right.
Within the NPP.
That's correct.
How would you describe this entire period of working for the NPP?
I think I describe my life within three main S's. When I say it's been a life of service, it's been a life of sacrifice, and it's been a life of selflessness. And those are the character traits I believe in. And I do think that my whole political career is anchored on what I call the triple S. It's important that those values that animated politicians at the formation of the NPP, those are the values that I think should be revived. And I do clearly believe it is time for us as a country to create a new dawn of politics in our country. When I say a new dawn, a new thinking, a new dimension, that will let us revive or revisit our understanding of what public service should mean to us as Ghanaians, and party politics in general should mean to us as Ghanaians. Right now, the narrative that is gaining currency is there are many people who feel a lot of politicians get in there to feed fat on the national treasury. I think it's a narrative that should change, and it can only change with a new generational leader who has exhibited that, as you said, as press secretary to the president. I became press secretary.
Are you suggesting that you concur that even now people are feeding fat on the public purse?
All I'm trying to say is that if you look at some of the surveys that have been conducted, the Afrobarometer surveys, the standing of politics and governance and the political architecture in the eyes of Ghanaians has really waned. And we need to do something to inspire the Ghanaian for them to have better or stronger belief in governance. You talk to a lot of the young people, they're very detached from politics. And that's dangerous for our population, which is a reasonably young population.
And for those who are not, they would often tell you that the ideas they share mean that if they got the opportunity, they would be even worse in leadership, because they are learning from the misdeeds of some leaders.
Those are the narratives that we should change as political leaders. And who best to do that than we, those of us who have been in politics, to show by our very experience in politics what we did, because I've been there before, as you said, for close to 6 years as press secretary to the president. I did not amass any wealth. I didn't add to my real estate because I didn't think that was the reason why I was there. And it's important that we inspire the new generation to understand that there is beauty and a sense of fulfillment in working for your country and doing something for the people of our country. That is what drives politicians. The centerpiece of politics has to be the welfare of the Ghanaian, especially the underprivileged. So you asked me about the highlights of my career. I mean, being appointed as press secretary to the president in 2001, especially as in 1998, I was one of the leading lights of then candidate Akuffo, seeking to unseat candidate Akuffo as the presidential candidate of the NPP. In spite of that, Mr. Akuffo, recognizing the long dedicated service that I had given to this tradition and believing in my integrity as someone who is a nationalist, decided to fill me as his press secretary. And I do believe that was the highlight of my service to my country. But to my party, I would say in Tamale in April 14, when I was massively elected as general secretary of our party, you know, although I was lying in my hospital bed in 37 military hospitals, I was able to win that election because the party activists, the party executives, they recognize the dedicated service that I have given to this tradition right as a youngster in those difficult days. Because it's all about sacrifice, it's all about service, and it's all about being tutored by these our elders who we worked with in those early days.
Tell me, there's this other crucial period in your service to the NPP, 2015.
That's correct.
When you were ousted.
I was
Some
ousted.
would even say sacked by your own party.
I think that was a very low point in I think in the party's history. I mean, it all started when there were some shenanigans orchestrated against the party chairman to try and remove him from office. Our constitution.
You speak of Afoko.
Yes, Paul Afoko. And I stood against that. I said I would not concur because, one, the party has rules and regulations. We have a constitution, and the constitution was not followed. When you want to file a petition against a critical officer like a party chairman or a general secretary, it still has to be filed at the party headquarters, at the secretariat of the party. That never happened.
Never.
That never happened. It went straight to the disciplinary committee. The disciplinary committee does not have initial jurisdiction to be able to start its own investigation into something unless the steering committee of the party has taken a decision to do so. And no such thing happened. So the chairman refused to attend the disciplinary committee hearings, and they went on to recommend his suspension. And even the national executive that was cobbled together to effect that suspension, in my view, was improperly convened, because according to our own dictates, it's the party chairman that has to convene it. He was the subject of it, but he still has to convene it. And he was not the convener, and most of the top echelon of the NPP were not there. The former President Akuffo was not there. Myself, General Secretary, I wasn't there. Candidate Akuffo Addo was not there. His vice, Dr. Bawumia, was not there. The minority leader, as he was then known, of HMN Sabosu, was not there. His deputy, Dominic Nitiwul, was not there. The women's organizer was not there. How can you have a national executive committee without a top echelon and continue to take perhaps the most far-reaching decision of the party? So I resisted it. And of course, I became a target after resisting it. You know, I said, no, that cannot be correct. That cannot be allowed to stand. So what I did was to try and prevail on Chairman Afoko to put in an appeal, to try and work with the party structures to seek redress. And again, he wasn't happy that to do that was to virtually accept the decision of that improperly constituted National Executive Committee. But I prevailed on him for the love that we have for the NPP. And then what happened even at the appeal hearing at the National Council was the one that shocked me, because President Akuffo himself was there to appeal to the group, to prevail on them that this is a party and we work together. And if the chairman hadn't done anything serious, then he didn't see the need for that suspension. And there is no provision for a suspension in our party.
Right.
If the general secretary of the chairman has to be set aside, you have to go to Article 11, which prescribes that you have to call an emergency conference. So all those things around it.
It is clear that those processes, procedures were not followed.
That's
Do you feel victimized by any particular person? And the rhetoric has always been that the current president, who was, then flag bearer of the party, felt he couldn't work with some of you and that he needed people he could actually work with. Is that the narrative?
Well, in this country, when you're very tough, and as I said, I've worked as press secretary to the president, and nobody could point anything at me. When you're a press secretary, you are privy to some of the most delicate information, both locally and internationally. And to the extent that the president will award me an Order of Volta officer level, and to me, he appreciates the work I did. And so I had an impeccable record as press secretary to the president. But everybody who's worked with me knows that I believe in propriety. And so I'm not one that can be manipulated easily. And sometimes some people
Are you saying you were
feel uncomfortable?
You were ousted because you stuck to, you were Ramrod Straight. You stuck to the straight and narrow, and some people didn't like that.
Yes, I am Ramrod Straight. I want to buy that, what you've said. And I believe in being frank and honest and straight. And I wanted to build a strong party. And I do believe Ghana needs strong parties, because it's when we have strong parties that we can hold our governments accountable when we are in government. And I think some people did not understand my posture and felt that perhaps maybe I was a bit too ambitious or too tough. And so they engineered my ouster on very flimsy allegations. And what hurt me was not really the official allegations, because they went about then to organize what I call vile propaganda against me, to try to present me as someone who had betrayed the MPP. But a person who had given his youth to this party all along and sacrificed at a time that we needed men to do so, hadn't become the chief executive of the party, just set about trying to build a strong party. And that's all I intended to do. That was the first time in the history of our party that we were able to ensure that all the 275 constituencies had activated accounts that all the executives were in the know, so that when we needed to mobilize them to do work at the local level, all the top executives will be in the know. So we set about building a strong party. I was disappointed in some of the elders, yes, you've mentioned, because I had worked with them from a Dubois in his time, and they know my character. And with the current president, in 1998, I was one of the leading lights of his campaign. In fact, I held his hand at his lunch in Osu Presbyterian Church.
Wow.
In 1990.
You basically stood for him then?
Of course. We went around the 230 constituencies with him. So he knows the caliber of person I am. And to be around for these orchestrations to be carried out on my life was very low in my life.
Did you feel disappointed in the current president for allowing all of that to happen?
Not only, I mean, some of the elders, a lot of them, including himself, so...
Including Akuffo.
I mean, of course, let's be fair to each other. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to push. What is important for me is what happens in the future. And right now, those are things in my past. In fact, in 2016, even when I was on suspension, I organized a lot of support for the party. And a lot of the MPs or some ministers were supported with resources that I put together.
In fact, that is not in contest. I actually remember someday, heading into the Joglu area and listening to a bulletin and how, members of the MPP had said that, look, it's good to bring him back into the fold. He's been very supportive, yes. even after his ousting and all of that. He's been very supportive. That's one thing that I think the grassroots and the entirety of your party acknowledges. But I'd like to find out from you, as we talk about how you left, so to speak. You were removed, ejected from your own party that you had been with right from the start. Did you ever post this? Bawumia was the driving force behind my suspension, Bawumia being the vice president. He was unhappy that I would be the next flag bearer after Addo. He's extremely jealous and morally corrupt. Did you post this?
No, I don't know where this is.
Did you ever say anything like that?
I saw it, and I responded to it last week. I don't know who did this. Again, I don't know who created that. They put my picture there. I've had a lot of interviews. If they have the audio to back it, I'm sure they would have produced it now. I haven't said any such thing. It's not correct. And again, I mean, we should stop the politics of lies, insults, and propaganda. It doesn't help us, and it keeps good people away from politics. And we need a critical mass of patriots and good Ghanaians who will be interested in running the country. And we should not let that narrative that says politics is dirty rule the day. I think politics can be nice. It's just a few dirty people who try to mess it up.
Yeah.
And we should kick those people out of politics. So that,
as a student of politics, I agree. We were told this in the lecture rooms. It is not politics that is dirty.
That's right.
It's the people.
It's the people
who practice
the
politics.
few dirty people who mess the politics up. So it's one of those things that I don't know where it came from. I saw it. I was
Have you bothered to trace this so that you can find which characters are behind it? Because this is basically character assassination.
Yeah, they've tried to assail my character many times, but God being good, I'm here. And that's the reason, that's what animates what I want to do, to be able to give comfort, to inspire the good people that look. Despite all the troubles and the hurdles that you have to scale in politics, you can get there. And don't be discouraged by these kinds of things that happen, you know. So I want to encourage everyone, every good Ghanaian who thinks about the prosperity of our country to get involved in politics, especially you, the youth. That is critical so that we can create a new narrative for Ghanaians. When you are in public service, you are there to serve the interests of the community, that collegial mentality that we should have. This crumble for materialism and individualism that has gripped us as a people is something that I want to advocate against.
Okay.
And that I want that to be the platform of my campaign.
Just pay attention to these names. Former President John Dramani Mahama.
Yeah.
Profile. Then within your party, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, Vice President. Some say he's in pole position. Alan Chabating, who has served, and Akuffo has served under this administration, only recently resigned. Dr. Akuffo, former Agric Minister. You are in there. Kwabena Agyei Agyepong, among others. All of these people have very rich CVs, which you do have too. But my question then is, why do you think you can beat all these people and become flag bearer of the MPP? What are those qualities that you feel you have that qualify you to be president, CEO of Ghana?
Ben, first and foremost, it's not about how I feel. And it's not for us as the aspirants. We don't matter that much. The important decision will be taken by the delegates. What is important, and this MPP, we've had time-honored principles, how we go about it. We have to be humble, go to the delegates, and explain ourselves to them. They know our record. Everybody has a record, as you've talked about it. And all of us have to be humble enough to submit ourselves to people like you to defend our record. And I think that over the last 1 year, and I started this exactly a year with Aisha on Joy, that my very first outing. It's been a year to start this project, doing this media tour, to tell the Ghanaian people how passionate I feel about the transformation of this country. It is the transformation of the country that matters to all of us. It's not your individual presidency. I have said before, and I want to repeat here, Ghana has practiced many economic models. Okay, whether it is PAMS card, whether it's ERP, whether it's structural adjustment, SAP, whether it's HIPIC, we have arrived where we are, not because of the different policies. It's because there's been a lack of implementation of what is right for our country. I would bring in a new drive, imposing order and discipline in our public lives. That is very important. And also a drastic penalty regime. I mean, we have to reach a point in our lives where people should be held responsible for what they do, especially to our national treasury. That, for me, is very important. The impudence must stop. So we have
So you're speaking of corruption?
everything in all aspects of our national life. Value for money, quality assurance, quality control. Yes, the politicians have to take the lead in that. But it's all for us Ghanaians, whether you are a doctor or a nurse or a headmaster in a secondary school or a farmer. All of us have a role to play. And I think it is time, after 16 years, especially within the MPP, when we've had a particular leadership, President Akuffo Addo and Dr. Bawumia at the top of our ticket for 16 years, there is a crying need for a drastic departure from what we are used to. that would afford the Ghanaian an opportunity. What we need now, especially as a party, is a messenger who can win the trust of the Ghanaian people. It's very important. A set of clean hands that can lead the struggle, to be able to convince the Ghanaian that what hasn't happened in the Fourth Republic, that third elusive victory, can be attained. And I do think that I bring a skill set of having been tutored within this party, having served at the presidency with President Akuffo, and have been a general secretary of the party. I have the vitality, the energy, the drive, and the principle. And again, you can look at my life experience. It is important that we walk the talk. We walk the talk, which means I've had the opportunity to do the things that others have done. I haven't done so as press secretary. I didn't add on to my real estate because my main focus is to serve my country. And I do believe that the delegates recognize who I am, the interactions they've had with me in the past and now. And I do think that when they weigh all that, I'm the one they're going to put their trust in.
You made mention of clean hands. Clean hands.
Yes.
You say you have those, but is that to suggest that some of those who are taking you on, contesting for the same slot, may not exactly be coming with clean hands?
It's not for you to draw that conclusion. I'm just talking about what I intend to do as a person. That's what I intend to do as a person.
Let's talk about this administration, how it has fared, because some say it will be very tricky for the NPP to break the 8, partly because of where we find ourselves, the economic downturn, the fluctuating currency, inflation, which thankfully now, according to agencies, is beginning to taper off, and all of that. We have a DDEP on our hands. We're hoping to get an IMF program. I could go on and on forever. Recently, you saw senior citizens. I found that a bit, I'm a young person, and you don't want to see elderly people do it. Whatever I see, you go around and see elderly people, maybe an elderly man digging a pit 6 feet. You feel for that person because you would expect that senior citizens would have a certain dignity and way of life. We had senior citizens picketing the Ministry of Finance. When you look at everything that we have to grapple with, how would you assess this administration? Let me start from the finance minister. Sophia Akuffo says he has failed. What do you think?
I think my views on the finance minister and the managers of our economy have been made public maybe, 8 months ago?
Things change.
Yeah. I said that way before anybody said it. When I saw the
listened to some of your interviews on that.
When I saw the direction that we were going, and I felt that it was incumbent on me as a patriot of the country, as a very senior member of our party, to try and advise the president that he had to intervene at the time. And he didn't do so, but that's his choice. He's the president. But I'm also allowed to disagree. I think I disagree with his position on the finance minister, because when you superintend this kind of difficult situation, the least you can do is to exit, and so that we can have a new energy, a new set of ideas. And I do think that the difficulty in this negotiation with the IMF is all down to the fact that they are being very diplomatic. I've been in government before. I know how these Bretton Woods institutions, how they operate. And they were not expecting the same finance minister to be leading our negotiations.
They were not?
Of course. I mean, if you have publicly come out to state the kinds of things that he said, and I would have wished that he would have done the honorable thing and stepped aside.
You're saying when he said, we're not going to the IMF, we're a proud people.
That's correct. I mean, when you do such a quick turnaround, in all developed societies, you stand down. But he hasn't done that. I don't want to keep repeating myself, because it's something I said.
Could that very factor, his retention, could it damage our prospects economically even in terms of securing it?
Well, I said it in October that it will be a long, drawn-out battle, because when you do that, they give you a set of boxes to tick that they know that we
struggle to tick.
And that's what has happened. So it's going to be a difficult process. Again, governments are given 4-year terms to run. And in politics, I've always said that 1 week is a very long time. And I hope and I do believe, and sometimes the president should listen to some of us, and we mean well for him, we mean well for the party. And therefore, when we talk like that and we say that there should be some drastic surgery of his government, sometimes it is the moral message you are sending to the Ghanaian people that matters. You know, when we are in times of adversity and you want to put the nation on a war footing and you want to implement austerity, your conduct has to be different. You cannot continue the same way doing business and expect the rest of the population to join you in austerity. So there are a few significant things that, in my view, he should have done, which he hasn't chosen to do. But, you know, 2 years is now less than 2 years. It's a pretty long time, and I think that he can turn it around.
Let's talk about the EMT, just by way of extension, because they have also superintended this entire development. At the helm, the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Recently, we heard from Dr. Kwabena Agyei, who said, listen, things are not going well. And he sings the same, in fact, from the same hymn book or hymn sheet, that you cannot have the same people who led us into the problem extricate us from that problem. So there should be some tweaking of the EMT. In fact, we should set them aside. Is that an opinion you agree with?
I expressed that opinion months earlier when I tried to advise the president to remove the managers of the economy and look at the EMT and the role they are playing. Because I don't think the finance minister can be held responsible alone. Because all these things that he did, he took it through, I'm sure, cabinet. There were cabinet colleagues that saw it. I do believe that whatever policy that you are implementing, you should be able to judge the likely outcomes. For us engineers, we are results-oriented. It is the outcome of your policies that matter, not just the implementation of it. And of course, you should have been able to calculate within some limited confidence interval that this is where we're going to arrive at in a couple of years or so. And having failed to do so, he should have accepted responsibility and resigned honorably. He hasn't done that. So, I mean, it's in business and in economic management, there's something that you cannot put a finger on. It's confidence, business confidence. And when that confidence drains from the general economic environment, it's difficult to...
It's interesting because this morning during the news review, we have guests join us, and we were joined by one lawyer, Paintel, who said that, look, he's never owned bonds, but on the back of everything that has happened, he wouldn't ever have confidence to do something like that. We heard from Dr. Yao Pebi on 99.7 Joy FM some time back, who said he led other doctors, convinced them to,
invest in government bonds.
Invest in government bonds and others. And with what has happened to them, in fact, they have colleagues who blew their money laughing at them. And what does that do for confidence? So I understand exactly what you're saying.
In fact, touching government bonds really means you are rewriting the whole governance of financial governance in the country, because government bonds are supposed to be risk-free. I mean, it's something that we never touch, and it's the lowest dividend, and everybody goes there as the last point of call. So it is a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in as a country, because it took us time to get Ghanaians to get back into the banking culture from the revolution of 1981 with the seizure of people who had 50,000 and more and that kind of stuff. People started keeping their money under their beds. And that doesn't help the economy. It took time, and a lot of work done by my boss, Mr. Akuffo, in his time to get the banking environment, in a way that was encouraging people to save. And so to bring us back to where we are today is a difficulty. But I do think that we'll fight through it.
And when you look at it broadly, how this could affect, you look at the graphic business today, no dividend for bank shareholders, DDEP erodes profits. They talk about 2020 and how difficult it was for banks. 2020 was so bad that for some banks, they couldn't make any profits, making it impossible for such payments of dividends to their shareholders in 2022. And with where we're headed, who knows how it's going to turn out in 2023. But on the back of all these developments, I've heard President Akuffo say that, tout the fact that the IMF boss suggested. I remember interacting with her and her making a bit of a point. He says before COVID-19, before the Russo-Ukrainian war and all of these things that we're facing, the economy was on a steady footing. People would tell you otherwise on the back of our borrowing and the trajectory we had. How would you assess this administration? Well, if I gave you a scale of 1 to 10, where would you peg this administration?
I wouldn't give you
in terms of
I would not give you a news headline.
Effectiveness, efficiency.
What is important, in my personal view, is that as a country, even as an individual, we should never spend what we haven't earned. And that should be the underlying factor. Governments after governments have been operating deficit budget finances. and that's not very good. It gets to a point in time that we should look Ghanaians in the eye very frontally and be very honest. This is what we have, this is what we can do with it this year. I mean, this government has done a lot with road infrastructure, health infrastructure, and all that. But the most important thing is we get to a point where we can't not finance our own budget. And I think it means you have to look at how you are spending money, the spending cuts that you have to do. Do you have to start with yourself? Do we reduce the size of government? I've had reason to recall that as a country, we've been increasing the cost of running government. I mean, from 110 districts, we have arrived up 260. Yeah. And what is the thinking behind that? It brings a bigger burden on the national treasury.
From 10 regions, we have 16.
We have 16. And has these districts occasioned better delivery of services to the population? Everywhere I've asked, the answer has been no. You understand? So we have to look at the governance structure. I mean, the creation of the Middle Belt, the Savannah, those development authorities, have they really helped? You know, it's another cost center.
Coastal development authorities. And all
these are all different cost centers. So I think we have to begin to look at ourselves. And President Kwabena Agyepong will do away with some of these things, cut down the size of government, make sure they were very efficient and effective in the use of our state money, and be upfront with the Ghanaian people on what we'll be able to achieve.
I'll go back to my question about a rating. It's not for a news article, though it could, serve the purpose. But I want to believe that if, let's say, the NDC were in power and I'd posed that question to you, you would be candid enough to give a rating.
No, what is important is that governments are given 4 years. And I think there's no better indication of the rating of a government than an election. And if you looked at what happened in 2016, where the MPP won, we won with a big majority, 1 million popular votes, 63-seat majority, and what transpired in 2020. That million majority was half to 500.
Right.
That 63-seat majority dissipated.
I mean, if not for the Kwabena MP who...
That's right. We had to fall on...
Who had defected, basically.
The stone that was rejected.
Right.
You understand? So that was a strong enough signal to the people, to the government and the president, to know that the Ghanaian people were not entirely enthused about the first term, which meant that some serious changes had to be made, which in my view has not been made. So it makes it even more difficult. And that is why there is a crying need to have somebody like myself who brings some new freshness, new vitality, to be able to reassure the Ghanaian people, talk to them about how we want to downsize government. And I'm not saying this because I am a candidate now. I've held these views, I've been consistent right from 2004 when I was press secretary to the president. So I believe in having this consistent messaging for our Ghanaian people. And it is time to have a message that the Ghanaian people can trust. And I do believe that on that score, I think I rate very high.
Minority Leader Dr. Akuffo has been, some say he's been acting on the party's General Secretary's comments about, if you don't downsize your administration, we're also going to have some issue to take with your new ministerial appointments, those who have been assigned trade and industry and all of that. The minority is calling for the numbers to be reduced from 86 to 65. You talk about creating or having a leaner government if you're in office. Yeah, no. How many ministers will do for you? And mind you, Lazarus Chakwera, president of Malawi, recently downsized from, I think, 31 to 25 cabinet ministers. Across the continent, there are much bigger countries with much smaller legislative bodies, and they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
What is it with us and huge numbers? Mr. President, I'm a man in a hurry. 6 years on, is he still in a... What would you do differently in that respect?
I think I'll respect the 19 ceiling that the framers of the Constitution... Cabinet. And I don't think the framers...
I think now we have 28 or so.
We're envisaging more non-cabinet ministers than cabinet. No, we have 19 cabinet ministers. And I think every head of a ministry should be a cabinet minister. And I think a lot of the ministries should be consolidated. I think there are quite a number of ministries that should not be existing.
Just a quick point there, because the minority in Parliament makes this point. I just want to know whether you agree with the mergers.
No, I made that point many years ago.
All of them, information.
In 2015 on hot issues on a sister station, TV3, and I said that, look, transport has to be seen as transport. I've never, even when I was press secretary to President Akuffo, when he took out aviation and ports and harbors from transport, I was looking at him with a certain amount of...
Did you ever voice it out?
Personally, yes, but not outside. What is important is that we need, for instance, aquaculture, fisheries should be part of agriculture. Youth and sports, I mean, the natural home should be education. That's where a lot of the sports and activities.
Formerly, at a point, that is what it was.
You know, so chieftaincy used to be a secretariat at the presidency. It wasn't a ministry on its own. And is there still a ministry for public sector reform? Have we seen any serious public sector reform over the last 20 years? I don't think that should be holding out as a ministry. You know, and there are many others that we can look at. And if you look at the configuration, you get within the 19 that the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution outlined as the maximum. And I also believe there should be one deputy minister per minister, and have the technical people do most of the hard work. That's one of the issues
people have taken
issue.
Because you look at trade and industry.
Yeah.
There's a deputy for trade, there's a deputy for industry, and now Dr. Stephen Amoah, Sticker as we call him, has been assigned there, and people are asking, what is he going to do?
Well, I'm telling you what I would do when I'm elected as president.
Obviously different.
That's right, very different. So I think we should have 38 ministers.
38 ministers?
Yes. 19.
Including the regional?
No. The regions will come and add up to 54.
Okay,
and
so
I think
38 plus the 16.
That should make it 54. I don't think you should go beyond 56. Maybe you have 2 non-cabinet ministers, but not quite the number that we have now. That's my personal view.
How about,
I've always shared this.
How about other appointments?
And it's not that it would really save the budget that much,
right,
but it sends a strong signal.
I agree with you.
It sends a very strong
that is what most
moral signal. And again, even the over-politicization of the state institutions. I'm a very technical person. There are very technical organizations that I think will do with less political interference. Yes, Article 71 gives the president the prerogative to appoint the CEOs of major state organizations. That is understandable because the president is the one that goes to the people for his mandate. But descending to deputies and appointing deputy chief executives in organizations that do not have deputy chief executives in their organigram is imposing more financial burden on those organizations
people stretch this and look at those who form part of the staffers.
That's right.
And in recent times, some lists that have come up, I believe the minority leader made mention of them: Youth Ambassador for Diaspora Affairs, Policy Associate, Chief Executive of Public Sector Reforms, Overseer of the National Cathedral, Church Relations Manager, Diaspora Church Mobilization Officer, Focal Person, La Francophonie, Technical Director, La Francophonie. When you look at this list, how can we save, on some of
I've worked at the presidency.
These matters?
I've worked under Akuffo before. We didn't have that. That's all I can say about that. And
you worked under Akuffo. You didn't have this.
No, I mean I could count on my 2 fingers the amount of senior staffers at the presidency at the time, and I mean what I'm saying.
Is this overdoing it?
So what is important?
We've spoken about 1,000 plus at a point.
No. Sometimes people get confused. There are about 700, who work there as public service workers, like parks and gardens, protocol, and all that.
We know of those.
Yes, yes. But what you add on, I think that you add on people to do a job for you. And in our time, I didn't see that many officers there. You understand? So I think it's important that the message we send across to Ghana and Ghanaians is that we are in difficult situations. And when we are in difficult situations, all of us have to cut back. And who to cut back first than the government? To send a strong example to the rest of the Ghanaian people. So it's not only about the staffing, it's about value for money in Ghana. Projects are largely over-invoiced. And I think a lot of our debt is buried in graft because I speak like this as a civil engineer who knows how jobs are done in other parts of West Africa, and we have some of the most expensive roads, and we don't back it with enough maintenance regimes. So the initial investment, we are quick to do new things without, having a strong maintenance regime. And that's the kind of thing that I want to see, to impose that kind of maintenance culture in our country.
I see the crawler, not the crawler, the slug saying 38 ministers, which is what you said indeed. But when we add the regional ministers, it will go up to 54.
54.
So 54 ministers
Yes.
in all. Let's take a look at industrialization.
That's right.
And I've noticed that most of you who have come out to say you are lacing your boots to contest for the flag bearership of your party seem to be going down that road, from Alan Chamating to everybody else. But when you look at our imports, which actually have grown incrementally over the last few years, even as we've started talking about import substitution, rice, sugar, and everything in between, even toothpicks. I do agree that some are produced here, but when you're still importing a lot from China and other places, it adds to your burden and puts pressure on your currency.
That's correct.
But here's the interesting bit. K.T. Hammond in Parliament yesterday made mention of what the Nigerians call pomo, wele, intestines, guts. We spent $165 million on that. What would you do differently in that regard?
I think what is important is that when you are in government, and I've always said that if I was finance minister, I'll have a focus on what the strength of my currency has to be. You understand? Because a country that has all these resources should not just allow our currency to slide anyhow and be in a tailspin as we've seen recently. You know, we started from 1-1 after the redenomination, and I think we should never have exceeded 5. And again, if you look at the demand stream, I mean, who are the people who need the dollars in our country? And I've asked this question of the finance ministry. I've never had any answers. It's important that we isolate the critical sectors of the economy that we need to support. For instance, the BDCs, they import fuel, okay? And the export price is determined by the currency exchange, largely. Because if you look at the world price for crude oil, it's been going down significantly. We have not felt it at the pump because of the weakening currency. So if government has organized its finances to be able to satisfy that demand and take them out of the general economic environment, you understand, and say, okay, we can provide it to you at 1 to 5, for instance, and fix the export price based on 5 cedis to the dollar. That will make a big impact on transportation, because once you reduce the cost of transportation, it has a direct impact on inflation, on food prices, everything. You understand? So some of these interventions have to be made. You can't say for the sake of economics and that everything has to be market-oriented. All parts of the world, when you are in trouble, governments intervene. You know, and when you isolate and take that demand away from the market, if you want to go and buy intestines, go and look for your own dollar. You understand? And again, that false demand that was occasioned by the loss of confidence in the economy, where a lot of Ghanaians who didn't need the dollar were purchasing it as an instrument of investment, because they knew that if they took it in January and it was 1 to 6,
Some were deliberately hoarding.
Hoarding it. You know, once the government can intervene in the way I'm talking about, most people will realize that there's no sense in keeping it under their beds. There will be a glut on the market. So there are a few innovative interventions that I think that the managers of the economy should have done. I think they picked on a few by saying that they were not going to give monies to those who are,
right.
And they didn't give me credit for their advice. Anyway.
I see. So that was your.
Well, I said that
many
times before they acted, because you cannot allow, the economy just to tail out like that. There has to be some intervention. We have to be deliberate in what we do, and we should be able to segment the demand. I mean, pharmaceuticals, for instance. A lot of Ghanaian my colleagues in pharmaceuticals, they've taken a big hit. Because you go and import, they've taken a big hit. I know a lot of them in business have taken a big hit. Because you go and import drugs, and at the time it was, say, 6 cedis to $1, and now you're having to pay your creditors at, 12 or 13 cedis to $1. Your business is gone. You understand? So these are difficult decisions that we as a government should have taken. And it's not too late to do that. To isolate the demand envelope and be able to see the key areas that government will say, look, these people, I'll be able to satisfy their demand for dollars, but at this rate. And I can tell you, once you do that and you ensure that Gangsterism doesn't take over because there are always rumors of how do the black market get the dollars that they have, the fresh notes that they have, because they do not print notes and they should not have custody of those things. You understand? So always it's important that we have strong supervisory division of the Bank of Ghana. And so far, nobody has been punished at the central bank for what happened.
That's another call people have made.
It's very serious because there's supposed to be a banking supervision division. So what happened during the banking crisis? Nobody has been held responsible. And again, there's no political will to punish those banks that took liquidity support and misapplied it and misused it. We've had...
You followed the court case with...
I think it's too laborious, and I mean, there's not enough political will and determination to punish wrongdoing. It's important that we do that to set a strong example. And when there was the housing collapse in America, I mean, Lehman Brothers and other people were in jail.
Yeah.
You understand? And so far, not in the regulatory side of it and not in the banking side of it. Nobody has been punished and people are walking about free. It encourages other people to take similar risks.
Impunity then. But let's talk about a few more issues as we wrap the conversation. Gold for oil, what's your take on it? Some have said there are so many pitfalls and if we're not careful. In fact, even before it came out, I had been on the show indicating, because I had trusted information, that we were not getting it from the United Arab Emirates. It was actually sourced from Russia. And there have been so many dynamics. In fact, it came out that we didn't even use gold to make that first purchase. We spent over some $40 million to secure that. What do you make of that project?
I think, first and foremost, we have become too presentational as a people. I think PR has taken over our lives. We should be real about what we do, okay? And not make too much noise about something that has even not started or happened. That's the first call. Number two, I have very radical views on how we are managing the extractive environment. Because I know, this is a fact, and I think the government knows, there has been an audit that even we cannot monitor the production properly. Whether it is deliberate or not, I don't know. But we have paid state entities like PMMC, Minerals Commission, to regulate the industry. Because the data that we have, or I have seen from some audit reports that I do believe that the government has, suggest that the disparity between what we are recording as leaving the shores of Ghana and what is arriving at the major destinations for our minerals, it's about 5 times.
In fact, we've seen records in the past, India, saying that this is how much it is imported from Ghana by way of gold, for example, which is far more than our projected projection or production that year. Same with the United Arab Emirates. And you ask yourself, how is that happening?
That's right. So these are institutional things that we should be tightening as a country. That's where I want to look at first. Because we are being skimmed off, whether with collusion from our own state officials or these investors are being very smart with us. And this is when we are onshore. So what happens with the oil offshore? Right. When we are not there, how do we know 30 miles offshore how much oil we are producing when we can even hear sometimes that the flow meters that are gauging the production can go faulty? So we have very serious systemic issues that we have to deal with. And that's what President Agyepong would like to deal with. Firm, decisive leadership, punishing those who tinker with our treasury, and send a strong signal to the Ghanaian people that impudence cannot be allowed, because I think we have all the laws, we have all the policies. It's a lack of enforcement and implementation and a lack of compliance with quality control and quality assurance. That is what is hurting our economy.
And that is what you bring to
bear. That is what I bring to
the
bear.
National Cathedral.
Look, let me tell you something.
$400 million projected. Egypt is building a CNC factory with that.
Well, the issues about, I'm surprised at the issues about the National Cathedral. Because first and foremost, in my view, or that's what I thought this was a private project. And all of us Christians.
When you say private project, what do you mean? The president's
Well, I mean, when the president said it, I thought that he was going to call on us Christians to make contributions. We have been building our own cathedrals wherever whether it's at my church at Mount Sinai in Kwabena Methodist or wherever. So I think that if the president calls on us, the Christians, we can make a contribution so that we don't need to take money out of our budget. We are stressed enough, okay, dealing with the difficulties that we are facing, that I think that as Christians, I would like to see a national cathedral. There's a national mosque. But the
national mosque put up solely by funding from the Turks.
That's what I'm saying. They were also funding from Ghanaian Muslims.
Yes,
so
I know Ghanaian, by and large.
That's right.
But it was adherents of the faith who contributed to that.
That's what we should do. And I think I want to call on the adherents of the Christian faith to contribute to that, and so that the government can take itself out of it, so that we don't need to fall on the national budget to do so. There are quite a lot of Christians in our country, and all of us can make a commitment to building our national mosque, our national cathedral. So
let's just wrap with a few concerns. I'll just try to rope them together. There's the bit about an early Congress, the pros and cons of it, give people ample time to campaign. Others say it will take the spotlight from the presidency, and it will make some people, everyone will start gunning for roles and all of that. It will take away from the performance of the administration. The other bit is General Secretary. You now have JFK at post, your new chairman, Stephen Ayesu in team, a perennial contender who now has the nod. But some say pegging them with the NDC's Johnson Asiedu Nketia and Fifi Fiavikwete is political suicide. What do you think about these two issues, very quickly?
First and foremost, I think that kind of thought has to be debunked. I mean, why are they saying that? I mean, Asiedu Nketia is a known entity in this country. We know his strengths. We've defeated him several times. So why are you saying...
He's defeated you a number of times.
Yeah, so we know ourselves. So it's not a new entity. There's nothing new about Asiedu Nketia that will surprise me, much less Fifi Kwete, who used to be propaganda secretary.
So you think JFK and Stephen...
It is not about the two of them.
Have the mettle to be able to do it.
It is not the individuals who decide. It is how strong your party machinery is. And this our MPP. The way it is fashioned and constructed, right from the polling station through the electoral area coordinators to the constituencies and regions, and the national.
It can be done.
It is a much stronger political machine.
What do you think about early Congress?
I'm coming. Anytime we've won elections in this country, we've won with huge margins. I mean, if you take the Rawlings' victories where we were tied, our hands were tied behind us, anytime the NDC has won, it's by the skin of their teeth. So I know the MPP has the numbers. If we can energize our base and there's no apathy and anger within the party, and we can have a united, cohesive force, the chances are that we would defeat the NDC any day.
Early Congress?
Okay? I don't understand the talk about early or late Congress.
Your constitution has its own stipulations.
Yes, so we should follow the constitution. The constitution says that when you are in government, you do it, I think it's 11 or 12 months to the next election. So if we can fix it on December 6, 2023, why not? That is what we will not be breaching the constitution.
Right.
It can be in November.
Okay.
I mean, there shouldn't be an argument about this. People are saying this for their own interest, because I need to take you back into history. Professor Dubois, when we lost in 1992 and we wrote a stolen verdict, there was a school of thought within the party that, look, because we wrote a stolen verdict, then he should be presented for 1996. So the Congress was delayed till 1996, and Mr. Akuffo outsmarted him. After that, everybody then wants an early Congress, because those who have the early advantage don't want others to campaign.
Point made. To cap off the conversation, very final bit to you. Are you still on good terms, speaking terms, affable terms with President Akuffo Addo?
Of course. I mean, in 2020, all of you saw me campaigning around the country with him. It's somebody I've known. We've had a long history together. Of course, we've had a few differences. I don't see him as often as I used to these days, but we meet at National Council, National Executive, and he's...
Why do you think that is?
Well, we've had a difficult last 8 years, you understand, with what happened, what transpired with my unfortunate and illegitimate suspension from office, albeit on very hushed up, lies and, on orchestrations against me. And I think that there were a lot of the seniors in this party who knew what I've done for this party, who know my character intensively and should have stood by me. They didn't. So that created a little bit of a situation. But since then, I've put these things behind me. And then when the president invited me to support his campaign for re-election, I didn't attach any conditions. And I didn't even expect anything, you know. So I just went in as a true servant of the MPP, worked myself off to support him, and he won, albeit a very small margin. So I have good relations. I call him once in a while these days, but that's fine.
Kwabena, thank you for joining us for this conversation. And we wish you the very best on this encounter. I hear KAA is your catchphrase now.
That's
KAA,
right.
Kwabena Agyei Agyepong.
KAA on the triple S.
Wow.
Service, sacrifice, and selflessness. I'm the embodiment of that.
Okay.
And I'm sure the party people appreciate that.
So KAA on the SSS. Interesting way to cap off the conversation as we have had this morning, Engineer Kwabena Agyei Agyepong. Well,